Uncertainty looms large over Sri Lanka as IMF delegates arrive in the island for crucial talks. Good evening and welcome. This is Primetime News on TV1. I am Jama Ratnayaka for the Newsfirst team. Here are your headlines for tonight. The 21st Amendment to the Constitution approved by the Cabinet. Police arrest several protesters at Gota Gogama protest site. Inter-University Students' Federation demands immediate resignation of the current administration. Enemies of the state roam free while protesters are apprehended. Opposition leader slams government. Parliamentarian Sanath Nishanta's brother arrested for unruly behaviour at a filling station. IMF delegation in Colombo. In our top story for tonight, Chinese President Xi Jinping has sent a special message to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. The message has been delivered to the President by the Chinese ambassador.
The President's media division. During the meeting, the ambassador had delivered a special message from the Chinese President Xi Jinping. He had briefed the President on the economic and humanitarian support that will be given by the Chinese government to Sri Lanka. In a tweet, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa thanked the Chinese President for wishing him on his birthday today. He had also thanked China for the continued friendship with Sri Lanka during these trying times. Former Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa has also wished his brother out of this crisis.
21 suspects arrested for blocking the Lotus Road gates to the President's office and Ministry of Finance were released on bail by the 4th Magistrates Court. Protesters blocked 2 more entrances to the President's office in the early hours of today. Protesters said the President's birthday must be named as a day of mourning. Accordingly, by this morning, 3 entrances to the President's office were blocked by the protesters. At around 9 AM, police arrived at the location, removed the protesters' huts and arrested 21 people. Military personnel were also deployed in the area. Later, another group of protesters demonstrated at the site demanding the release of those who were arrested. The Occupy Golface protest at the Gota Gogama protest site demanding the immediate resignation of the President is currently on its 73rd day. Police said that the protesters moved towards the 2 other gates leading to the President's office earlier today and completely obstructed the path by setting up 2 makeshift tents. Police said that the protesters set up tents at these gates and This situation prevented public employees reporting for essential services at their respective offices from entering or exiting the premises. According to the police, the finance secretary's attendance at the meeting between IMF officials was also delayed as a result of the protest. 21 suspects arrested for blocking the Lotus Road gates to the President's office and the Ministry of Finance were released on personal bail of 500,000 rupees by the 4th Magistrates Court.
According to the police, the protesters tried to obstruct or delay the representatives of the IMF. In court, it was noticed that the claim was a lie. If they are suppressing us like this, how can they go to the international community and request for assistance?
A media briefing was held at the Gota Gogama protest site. It was organized to oppose the arrests.
They accused us of blocking the road and not allowing officials to attend the IMF meeting. But we were never informed about it. If we were informed about it, we would have cleared the way. When the country is in a crisis, we are carrying out a struggle to make the country victorious.
The people didn't take to the streets because of the fuel queues or their hunger. They took to the streets opposing this murderous president, the Rajapaksa regime, Ranil Wickremesinghe and everyone behind the Gotabaya conspiracy. When they were protesting, the police had arrested and beaten them. This is absolutely shameful. People are dying on roads. Parents are protesting because they don't have food for their children. These protests will multiply. I tell Nandasena Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Ranil Wickremesinghe that the day of their downfall is fast approaching. Brace for that. This is your final lap.
Issuing a statement, the Sarvapakshika Aragalakaruwa movement condemned the arrest of protesters from the Gota Gogama protest site this morning. They stressed that the protest was not aimed at obstructing any meeting with the International Monetary Fund. Moving on, the Inter-University Students' Federation held a protest march against the government today and marked Student Heroes Day.
Members of the Inter-University Students' Federation began a protest march from the Lipton roundabout today. They demanded the resignation of the government led by Prime Minister Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe. Many trade unions joined the march. How many more people should die for President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to become successful? Until how long should fuel queues extend? Once in 2 weeks, Ranil Wickremesinghe highlights the severity of the crisis. Gotabaya Rajapaksa and Ranil Wickremesinghe are useless. They must go home.
Gotabaya Rajapaksa වැඩකුත් නැහැ රනිල් වික්‍රමසිංහ වැඩකුත් නැහැ මේ දෙන්නම ගෙදර යන්න ඕන ඒ වගේම පොලිසිය මහතුරුන්ට අපි මතක් කරනවා ඔය කාකි කෝට් ඇඳගෙන ඉන්න මහලොක්ක රැක්කට පාර්ලිමේන්තුව ඇතුලේ ඉන්න 70 බුරුත්ත රැක්කට අපි මතක් කරනවා ඔය කාකි කෝට් එක ඇතුලේ ඉන්න මිනිස්සුව අවදි කරලා තියාගන්න.
We ask them to awaken the human in them. They are also facing problems relating to gas, fuel, electricity and schools. The government is trying to suppress us. They are beating us until our heads bleed, arresting our leaders and imprisoning protesters. We ask the police to stand on our side without becoming scapegoats. The protesters marked Student Heroes Day opposite the 4th railway station. They dedicated it to those who have sacrificed their lives to overthrow what they call a stinking social system.
The Socialist Youth Union staged a protest in Matara today.
The Socialist Student Union organized an event to mark Student Heroes Day. The event was held at the Public Library Auditorium in Colombo.
අපේ රටේ ඩොලර් බිලියන 7.9ක් වත්කම තියෙද්දි විදේශ සංචිතේ
Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who came into power when the country's reserves were at $7.9 billion US, is celebrating his birthday shamelessly after the dollar reserves have dropped to zero. Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Basil Rajapaksa, Namal Rajapaksa, Ranil Wickremesinghe, Sagara Ratnayaka and Akila Viraj are not working together for the benefit of the people. These corrupt rulers are incapable of even changing the life of one person who is suffering in queues under the scorching heat and heavy rains. That is the truth.
එක ජීවිතයක් වෙනස් කරන්න පුළුවන් කමක් නැහැ මේ දුෂ්ට පාලකයින්ට. මෙන්න මේ සත්‍යය.
Businessman Dhammika Pereira promised to the Supreme Court that he will not take oaths as either a member of parliament or a minister until a decision is made with regard to the fundamental rights petitions that have been filed challenging his appointment. He made this promise when 5 fundamental rights applications filed challenging his appointment were taken up at the Supreme Court today.
Businessman Dhammika Pereira promised to the Supreme Court that he will not take oaths as a parliamentarian or as a minister through President's Counsel Ramesh De Silva in the presence of Supreme Court Justice Priyantha Jayawardena, Yasantha Kodagoda and Arjuna Obesekara. The fundamental rights applications will be taken up for consideration on Tuesday. 1 writ application and 4 fundamental rights applications were filed with the Supreme Court challenging the appointment of Dhammika Pereira to the SLPP national list post that was left vacant following the resignation of Basil Rajapaksa. Businessman Chandra Jayaratne, journalist Royal Raymond and the Centre for Policy Alternatives are among the parties that filed these applications.
A delegation from the IMF arrived in Sri Lanka earlier today. More news on this story after this short commercial break.
මොකද මහත්තයා මේ
නෑ මේ ගෙදර සිංක් එකේ
අයි මහත්තයා ස්ලෝන් නෙවෙයිද දැම්මේ
හදිස්සියට බාලා පයිප්පයක් දැම්මේ නැද්ද මුදලාලි ඊයේ පෙරේදා කඩේ රිපෙයාර් කරන්න ගෙනාපු ගම් චුට්ටක්
මේ වගේ ප්‍රශ්න වලට හොඳම විසඳුම ස්ලෝන් ගම් චුට්ටක් හැබැයි ඉක්මනින් දාගන්න ස්ලෝන් පයිප්පයක්
ස්ලෝන් ගම් චුට්ටා හැම ගෙදරකම සිටිය යුතු ජලනල කාර්මිකයා දැන් ළඟම ග්‍රොසරියෙන් මිලදී ගන්න.
Welcome back to the news. A discussion between Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and the IMF delegation that arrived in the country was held in Colombo this morning. It was held at the Prime Minister's office. The 10-member IMF mission arrived in Sri Lanka as part of discussions to fashion policy corrections that will restore monetary stability and allow the country to repay debt. Governor of the Central Bank, Secretary to the Ministry of Finance and Senior Advisor to the Prime Minister, Dr. R.S.H. Samaratunga, had also accompanied the Prime Minister at the discussion. The IMF mission is also scheduled to hold discussions with the President, officials of the Finance Ministry and the Central Bank in the coming days. Meanwhile, Australia's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Penny Wong, said in a statement today that the country will provide $50 million to meet urgent food and healthcare needs in Sri Lanka. In her statement, Penny Wong said, and I quote, "We will contribute an immediate $22 million to the World Food Programme for emergency food assistance to help 3 million people in Sri Lanka meet their daily nutritional needs," adding, quote, "Australia will also provide $23 million in development assistance to Sri Lanka in 2022 and 2023, unquote. Venerable Dr. Omalpe Sobitathera revealed that thugs and ruffians with links to the government are charging into filling stations and intimidating masses who are waiting in line patiently for fuel.
There is no end to the long fuel queues. The people are inconvenienced by this. Thugs are controlling the fuel lines at almost every place. I have been informed that certain thugs are using their power to dominate these areas. These thugs are connected to the politicians from the Sri Lanka Podujana Perumana. It is of concern whether there is direct state sponsorship to these activities. People who were in line for fuel queues in Union Place, Colombo too, echoed the same concern over what they had experienced on Sunday. They pumped fuel, stating that they are people from the area. We have not had anything to eat and there is no petrol here. Those people took fuel in gallons for their three-wheelers.
ගමේ කියලා මේ කට්ටියක් ඇවිල්ලා එකම සෙට් එකක්. හරිද? ඇවිල්ලා එතන 3 wheel දානවා මෙතන පොලිමත් තියෙනකොට. පොලිසියෙන් එකෙන් ගානක් ගත්තෙත් නෑ OIC හිටන් හිටියා.
මේ ගමේ කියලා කට්ටියක් ඇවිල්ලා ඉතින් මේක අලුත් පොලිමක් අද තමයි පටන් ගත්තේ මේක. වෙනදාට මෙතන පොලිමක් නෙවෙයි.
SLPP MP Sanath Nishanta's brother has been remanded after he was arrested on charges of assault and obstructing the duties of police officers.
SLPP member of the Arachikattuwa Pradesh Sabha, Jagat Samantha, was arrested and remanded until the 23rd of June for charging a fuel queue at a filling station in Arachikattuwa and assaulting an individual while obstructing the duties of police officers. The suspect is a brother of former state minister from the SLPP, Sanath Nishanta. The local government member had charged at a fuel queue at a filling station in Arachikattuwa on Friday and attempted to obtain fuel, stating that he had a permit to purchase fuel without staying in the queue. The altercation had taken place thereafter. The suspect Jagat Samantha and 2 others were informed to report to police and they did so today. Thereafter the men were produced in court.
The dearth in fuel in the country has aggravated to such an extent those employed in essential services too are now facing difficulties sourcing fuel. Queues opposite filling stations across the country had extended today as the fuel crisis continues to grip Sri Lanka.
Filling stations have been instructed to prioritize essential services when selling fuel, but people in queues have been protesting against that. Police officers, teachers and healthcare workers experienced a similar situation at a filling station in Mahiyangane today.
සාධාරණ මිනිසුන්ගේ කේන්තියක් තියෙනවා ඇත්ත අපිත් ඒක දන්නවා බලපත්‍ර අනුව තමයි ඉතින් අපි මේ ඇවිල්ලා මේ කරන් ළමන්ගේ අනාගතය වෙන්නේ
මේක මේ කරුමයක් ගෙවන්නේ මානසික පීඩනය පේපර් බලනවා කියන්නේ මනෝමය කාර්යය මානසික කාර්යය ඒකට නැහැ chance එකක් අපිට.
Health workers at the Mahiyangana hospital held a protest citing they were not sold fuel despite being a part of essential services.
පරලෝ යන රෝගීන්ට ප්‍රතිකාර කිරෙන්න එන අය අත්‍යවශ්‍ය නැති නම් මොකද්ද අපිට තේරෙන්නේ. එහෙමනම් අපි ගෙදරවල වලට ඉන්නවා. අනිත් ප්‍රදේශයකට අපිට නිවාඩු ලබා දෙන්න. සීපස්සට අපි ගෙදරට ඉන්නවා.
Sri Lanka police intervened to control the situation.
එතන කන්ට්‍රෝල් කරන්නේ. නමුත් මට අරහින් කෑ ගහනවා අධ්‍යාපනයට දෙන්නේ නැහැ කියලා. දැන් මහත්තයා කියන බණ අපි කොච්චර අසරණ වෙනවද කියලා. නමුත් අපි හොස්පිටල් එකට කවදාකවත් නොකර ඉන්නේ නැහැ. මම පොරොන්දු වෙනවා ඊළඟට මේට එන්නේ පෙට්‍රල් කොතෙන්ටද ડોක්ටර්ගෙන් සෙට් වෙන වෙනමම පොලිමක් හදලා ඔයගලන්ට ගහලා.
Health workers from the Dambula hospital visited the city filling station to obtain fuel dedicated for essential services. However, the filling station had run out of fuel. Health workers then protested at the premises.
අපි සිකුරාදා දවසෙත් මේක වැඩ කරලා පැය 24ක සේවාව අඛණ්ඩව අතින් අතට යන සේවාව අපි තෙල් පොලිමට යනකොට ෂෙඩ් එකේ තෙල් ඉවරයි. ඒතර අපිට ගෙදර යන්න බෑ.
People protested when workers of cooperative societies tried to buy fuel in Hingurakoda under the essential service category.
අපි තෙල් ගෙන්නේ නැත්නම් අපි තෙල්ගෙන් කතා කරලා ඔයාලට කවදාවත් තෙල් හම්බෙන්නේ නැහැ. දවස් 10 නේ 15ක් ගියත් අපි තෙල් ගෙන්නේ නැත්නම් ඔයාලට තෙල් ගහගන්න හම්බෙන්නේ නැහැ.
අපි දවස් 5ක් විතර හිටියා නම් ඔයගොල්ලෝ දවස් ගින්න බලනවා වටින්න. කරන්න ඕන තෙල් ගාලා මහන්සිනේ. ඔව්. ඒ තෙල් එන්න අපේ ස්ටාෆ් එකට තෙල් ඕන. මෙතනට ඇවිල්ලා රාජකාරී කරන්න. අපි පොලිමේටියට රාජකාරී කරන්න වෙන්නේ.
Tensions arose at a filling station in Gaul dedicated for essential services when health workers had arrived to buy fuel. The Sabugaskanda refinery is facing a possibility of being closed down again if the government doesn't import crude oil. The association to protect the refinery held a protest today demanding the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation to supply crude oil. They entered the CPC head office in Demmatakoda and met with the chairman and officials to discuss the matter.
The chairman said 5 companies have submitted unsolicited bids and that the CPC has awarded tenders to all 5 companies. But this has been delayed due to certain conditions they have made. We were to receive fuel on the 23rd and the 24th. but that won't happen. We can operate the refinery on the safe side only until the 24th. If we would receive crude oil by the 28th or 29th, then we will be able to keep the refinery running through other methods. We will decide what we can do based on the decision they announced on the 22nd.
Samagi Janabalawege parliamentarian Mujibur Rahman filed a complaint at the police headquarters today. He called for an investigation into the conduct of some police officers at filling stations.
Some police officers who should be ensuring the security of the country and the people are not doing that. They are protecting the rulers. They are implementing an organized plan to suppress the people. We are asking the police chief to conduct an investigation into the police officers who go beyond the scope of their duties and act according to the wishes of political leaders. Disciplinary action must be taken against them. That is why we requested from the IGP at the police headquarters. A senior officer had attacked an unarmed comrade of ours with a pistol. If the pistol had fired, they would say it was a misfire and happened given the moment. Some police officers who work under this IGP act like thugs and beat people who have been in queues for many days at filling stations. The underworld woke up and started shooting people. Now the official state underworld is in action. Is this what you call minimum force?
Still in local news, many Sri Lankans have been compelled to commute using public transport to report to work due to the fuel crisis. However, the fuel crisis has now affected public transport as well.
Public sector employees will be working from home for a period of 2 weeks due to the fuel crisis. However, essential services and private sector employees faced many difficulties in reporting to work today.
Sri Lanka Railways has failed to provide facilities for commuters. Even though the rulers are saying public transport is being maintained, the railway operations are facing many difficulties. Earlier, Sri Lanka Railways maintained its fuel stocks. Normally between 500,000 to 600,000 litres of fuel is stored in the facility. But now that amount is reduced to less than 100,000 litres.
Amidst the fuel crisis, government and government-approved schools in Colombo and other cities will remain closed for a week. Authorities took steps to continue the academic activities in schools that are not affected by the transportation crisis. Were adequate transport facilities given to students and teachers of schools that are not closed? Those city schools did not function. Students from other schools faced difficulties in reaching school today.
The gas crisis in Sri Lanka is chief amid a myriad of crises gripping our nation at present. In fact, the gas crisis continues to worsen each passing day, with more people joining lengthy queues in hopes of purchasing gas. Those without gas are in queues to purchase kerosene. While the people continue to bear the brunt of all this, officials seem to be prioritizing striking lucrative deals over the welfare of the masses. Newsfirst's Shehan Ranatunga joins us for a revelation on the matter.
Sri Lanka is experiencing a gas crisis, and on top of this there is a controversial tender to supply gas which is stirring up a lot of questions. Now, Gas Lanka has issued a statement providing a clarification on this very controversy, but just before we get into that, here's what has happened so far. Now, we know that Gas called for tenders to supply gas for 12 months. That's 280,000 metric tons of gas. A tender was called for, and we know that 3 companies supplied tenders. The lowest bid was made by CN Gas Singapore, which quoted $96 per metric ton. That's for freight and insurance. That's in addition to the contract price. The second lowest bid was made by Oman Trading. That was for $129 per metric ton. Now, we know that thereafter, on the 5th of April, CM was informed that it was indeed awarded the tender, but however, on the 13th of May, Oman Trading made an appeal They submitted a letter calling for various documentations to be provided, requiring clarifications on this awarding of a tender, and subsequently the previous tender awarding was suspended and the tender was awarded to Oman Trading. Now, it is in response to this that Litrogas has now issued this clarification. Now, Litro says that it issued this 9-point statement, as you can see behind me, where it says that it had not been able to select CM due to the inability to source $30 million letter of credit for this purpose. Now, this is where the controversy comes into the picture. Now, the tender was for 280,000 metric tons. But according to Litro, CM said on the 30th of May that they can only supply 6,600 metric tons at $112, which Litro says is only sufficient for 5 days. Now, let's do the mathematics. When you take 6,600, you divide that by 5 days. You multiply that figure by 365 and you have 481,800. Now, which means that of the 481,000 we require, we have only tendered for 200,000. Now, why is there a difference of 200,000? This Litro has not provided a clarification with regard to. Now, Oman Trading, however, they remain at $129 for 100,000 metric tons. That is Oman Trading's bid offer, and that they did not change their position. So the question now comes to into the picture. How much of our money is being wasted by this transaction? The difference in freight cost is $17. That's where Oman Trading offered it for $129, and we know that CM offered it for $96. Now that's it, and they increased that to $112. That's a difference of $17. Now you multiply that by the 481,000. This is the dollar cost to Sri Lanka.
Thank you, Shahan, for that insightful revelation. Moving on. Sustenance is a challenge for many in Sri Lanka at present. Tonight, we bring to your attention the story of a family residing in the Patana Panvila village in Hikkadwa. This family has not consumed a rice-based meal in over 6 months. Instead, they have resorted to consuming jackfruit to feed their hunger. This is their story.
ටික තමයි කඩන් වෙලා කන්නේ. ඒකවත් හරියට හොයාගන්න බෑ. ගොම්ම වලින් ජීවත් වෙන්නේ. මේ පොඩි ළමයි ටිකක් තුරු කරගෙන.
This family was moving from place to place until the current employer of this woman, who is the breadwinner for the family, decided to give her a plot of land. This small shelter may not look like home, but it is home for this family.
මාතේ දවසක් වැඩට නේ. තින දවසක් කනවා නැත්නම් පොඩි එක්කෙනාට කන්න තියලා අපිට ඉතින්.
The little girl, who is the heart of this family, is homeschooled as the family is unable to afford to send her for nursery. The father of this family is a day laborer and he barely finds work anymore. People normally plan the upcoming days depending on how much money they have in hand, but this family plans the next day depending on the number of jackfruit and breadfruit they can find. This is just one of many stories in Sri Lanka.
News First with the people.
More news after the short commercial break. Stay tuned.
EVA Trusted Confidence now has a fresh new feel. Introducing EVA Heavy Flow Wings with an extended length of 280mm to provide extra protection on days you need it most. And for the first time in Sri Lanka, an antibacterial layer minimizing microbial growth, it controls odor and promotes freshness, while the extra length multiplies absorption. Available in both cotton feel wings and Drytex wings variants. EVA, leading with confidence.
Welcome back to the news. According to Minister Harin Fernando, the Cabinet had granted approval for the 21st Amendment to the Constitution today. He tweeted that the amendment will be tabled in Parliament soon. Moving on, Australian Minister for Home Affairs and Cyber Security Claire O'Neill arrived in Sri Lanka on an official visit.
According to the Australian High Commission, she is expected to meet with President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe and Foreign Affairs Minister Professor G.L. Peiris. The High Commission said, quote, "This shows our strong and enduring bilateral relations as we celebrate our 75th anniversary of diplomatic relations," end quote. Minister O'Neill will discuss how Australia can deepen cooperation and assist Sri Lanka to face economic times, as well as strengthening engagement on transnational crime, including people smuggling. At the same time, Australia's Shadow Immigration Minister Dan Tehan has urged Prime Minister Anthony Albanese to visit Sri Lanka to address the humanitarian crisis in the country in hopes of reducing the number of asylum seekers making the dangerous journey to Australia. Border Force and Sri Lankan authorities have intercepted at least 4 boats of refugees bound for Australia following Labour's win at the federal election almost 1 month ago. Dozens of asylum seekers on one vessel have since been returned to Sri Lanka over the weekend, where they revealed they were told by smugglers they would be welcomed by the newly elected government.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa says those who are responsible for the current crisis have no plan to solve it.
Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa met with representatives of civil groups including the People's Movement for Reforms and Sarva Pakshika Aragala Karuwa.
අවංකව කතා කරනවා නම් මේ රට නිවැරදි මාර්ගයට ගෙන යන්නට නම් අඛණ්ඩ
We need a 5-year plan with a correct vision to steer the country in the right direction. The all-party government can be a short-term solution, but I don't see it as a solution to achieve political stability. The entire world knows that an election should be held after forming an all-party government. There will be some instability there. The people that pushed the country to the wall is now in the comfort zone. Those who were behind the violence on the 9th of May waved their hands freely and walked into parliament. The protesters were arrested. They are carrying out a witch hunt against them. The people who caused this crisis have no plan.
ආරම්භ කරපු ඇත්තන්ට කිසිම වැඩපිළිවෙලක් නැහැ.
In news overseas, French President Emmanuel Macron's Ensemble alliance suffered a huge setback as his political coalition failed to secure an absolute majority in the legislative elections, putting the presidential majority at the risk of forging alliances with other parties.
And with that, it's a prime time wrap for tonight. For the Newsfirst team, I am Jama Ratnayaka. However, do stay tuned to TV1 as Face the Nation is up next. Take care and good night.